Hello and welcome to another edition of the ASCA Weekly Podcast. I am your host, Charles Fallon, back in here for another episode. And boy, oh boy, even though it was only a cup only weekend at the Stone Yard, we got a lot of stuff to cover today. How about on a week where we lose a young superstar due to an indefinite suspension? Another one is born, snapping an 18-race winless drought. The top two title protagonists collide for the first time in 2025. Who was at fault? We'll discuss that. We'll discuss how only two teams have won the opening four races of the 2025 campaign, who also just happen to be the top three in points. Those are your three winners thus far in the new year. We'll also go over the biggest surprises and the disappointments of the campaign thus far. Some surprising names on both of those lists, and we'll be breaking down the first night races of the season, Saturday night short track racing under the lights at Disney Motor Speedway. That's coming up next week. But first, we're going to get into this podcast. And we'll begin by shouting out the ASCA's premier partners, Rowdy Energy. You already know. Click the top link in bio. Go get yourself a Rowdy Energy to keep you awake throughout the rest of the show. And then Circle B Diecast / Plan B Sales. If you want a replica Todd Kidd, your points leader, Diego Ricciti diecast, or a Shane Park diecast, Rising Star, get that while it's cheap. Hey, go over to Circle B Diecast, Plan B Sales, and use coupon code ASCA for free shipping on any orders $20 or more inside the US. So once again, shout out Rowdy Energy, shout out Circle B Diecast / Plan B Sales, and yeah, let's get into it. So Shane Park, huh? About time. I think this has been a long time coming for Park. And obviously, we kind of mentioned it in the intro that the ASCA did lose one of its rising stars this week. Probably for good. And we're not going to get into that because we spent, the first portion of last episode really breaking down that entire situation. And obviously, it's a touchy subject. But we all know the situation that happened with Laquan Scranton. We all know his indefinite suspension. And at this point in time, it does not look like he will be returning to the sport anytime soon. This opens up a void at the top of the sports echelon in that elite level driver category, because I think Laquan was there. I think everyone can pretty much agree on that. You look at what he did last season with the 3 wins, his breakout campaign, 544 laps led, 4th in points in Dexter Motorsports Equipment. He was there. And he was taking the fight to Diego before kind of falling off a bit late. And he was going to take the fight again to the likes of Urquidy, Park, and Kidd this year, I'm sure, even though he was off to a rough start to the new season. This, with him out of the picture, obviously, this opens up a void. A void for someone else to step up, a young talent to step up. And right now, we're seeing Shane Park really kind of embrace that role right now. And, it's huge for Park to finally get his first oval win since 2020 in the ASC. That's big. And, obviously for Park, this has been a long time coming. Like I just mentioned, we talked about what he did last season. 7 top 5s, 12 top 10 finishes. He only had the 1 win at the Suits Computerville very early in the campaign and really didn't have race winning speed outside of San Diego, which is the odd part. Like Park was super, super, super consistent up at the front of the pack. You have to be with 7 top 5s, but he just didn't have what it took, that level of pace that it took to take the next step. and win multiple races in a season. And I get that, this win wasn't a dominant victory or anything. He didn't spank the field like Diego did last week. I understand that. I understand that if Cameron Atwood's pit crew didn't sell on the final stop, he probably runs away and wins this race. I get that. But it certainly means something. And it certainly should mean something to win a race like this at the Stone Yard. We've only seen 9 drivers win here in the past. There's a reason why 3 drivers have combined to win 11 of the 20 races held here. And they're all veterans, and 2 of them are past champions and some of the best drivers the sport's ever seen. It takes a specific kind of skill set to succeed at a track as treacherous as the Stone Yard. So to win here, that ain't no fluke. That is not a fluke in the slightest. And Park becomes the second youngest Stone Yard winner in the track's history. That's not a fluke, okay? And then when you factor in the job he did to hold off a hard-charging, a pissed-off Diego Urquidy, we'll get into why he was pissed off in just a second, driving from 18th all the way to the runner-up spot. He fends him off, and then fends off an even more hard-charging Braden Bennett, flying. He was beating Park like 2 to 3 tenths a lap there for a bit. And, Park didn't budge. He didn't flinch. He stayed ice cool as a cucumber and held on, drove off, and won the race. Like, that takes serious level of skill. And it takes having ice in your veins to be able to pull that off again, especially at a track as tricky and treacherous as a Stone Yard. And we're talking about a guy in Park that has won 2 road course races, so he knows about having ice in your veins. You can't afford to make a single mistake on a road course, and there's so many areas to do so. So Park knows all about that. And anyone that's been following his career knew that the oval wins were coming, knew that this guy is due for a breakout season. And I think 2025 could certainly be the year. And I know that we've all been talking about, Kane and Urquidy at the top of the standings. Don't look now, but Shane Park is 3rd in points, only 14 back. Like, he is not out of this by any sort of the imagination whatsoever. So, do not count out this 24 team just yet. It seems like they're really starting to hit their stride. It's back-to-back top 5 finishes for that group. And they're right back in the mix. Like Park said on Twitter after the race, they are right back in the mix. And I really think these next couple weeks are going to be crucial in kind of determining, okay, can Park really insert himself once again in between Ken and Urquidy? Because Disney and Belltown are such hit or miss tracks for him. He can, 1 week he'll run 13, 3 laps down. One year, I should say, he'll run 13, 3 laps down. On a short track, the next he'll be running second. So it's, I don't know what to expect out of that group. And it's going to be really crucial that they do find a way to hit on the setup and find a way to be up there competing with Kid and Urquidy the next couple of weeks. I think it's going to be huge, especially because we know that we're heading to Kid and Urquidy's worst tracks. Kid, awful at Disney, Urquidy traditionally bad at Belltown, his home circuit. So it's going to be very interesting to kind of see how Park shakes that out. And then, of course, we got a race at Michigan coming up. We got a race at Utah coming up, which the NDRL drivers say races a lot like a road course. Like, Shane Park is certainly due for a multi-win season, entering his 5th year at the Cup level, 24 years of age. He's just now entering the prime of his career. Championship window opening up. This could really be his breakout year. Not in terms of the statistics. He's going to have a hard time really topping what he did last year, but I certainly think in terms of the wins, he is going to be back in the win column at some point in 2025. besides this race. This is just the start. So let's move on from that and let's talk about the title protagonist and their little hubbub on lap one. And this is a very interesting situation because we know in the past, between drivers on track, when it's Diego versus someone, generally Diego has always been the aggressor. Always. That's why, the majority of the fan base does not like him. That's why a lot of drivers, for the longest time, did not like him. And they would just tolerate him, and why he's been in the doghouse a lot, nearly suspended and probation. I mean, I can't even count on one hand how many times he's gotten probation. Um, but obviously, we've seen a shift in Diego's driving style as he's gotten older, as he's gone to therapy, as he's matured, as he's gotten married. We've seen a shift, and we certainly saw it last season where he really wasn't involved in any high profile incidents. I think the only one I can really remember is him kind of running Ross Jackson up the track at San Diego. And even still, it's a short track, so that's kind of a racing deal. It's short track racing. It is what it is. But he doesn't go about intentionally wrecking people anymore, intentionally running into guys to get by. And he uses so much more finesse, and he's just as good as not, if not better, than he was 5 years ago when he was wrecking people. Which just shows how incredible of a talent Diego truly is, and why he is, in my opinion, my humble opinion, the greatest of all time. So when we look at this incident between Todd Kidd and Diego Urquidy, who was at fault? I think the answer is both of them, honestly. I think you have to remember that it is lap one. This is the stone yard we're talking about. You need give and take. And we saw, throughout the day, that driver on the inside line, they know that they kind of have to lift a little bit, because the guy on the outside is going to get a huge run. We saw it, I believe, on the final restart. Norm Lester let Breen Bennett go by. They were kind of in a similar situation as Kidd and Urquidy. And Lester, he saw Bennett was coming on the outside. He was going to have that run. So Lester let him go by. And, but the problem is Bennett drove off and left him. And Todd Kidd knows that Diego was coming off back-to-back wins. He knows that Diego had been cutting into his points lead. He knows that the Stone Yard is historically Diego's best track. He's kept all of this in mind. And, it's a sketchy situation. I think obviously both drivers could have avoided this, certainly, had they just exuded more give and take. But you have to consider that they know that they are the two best drivers in the sport right now. And they know that they are racing each other week in and week out for this championship. It's really Urquidy, Kidd. You got Park like just a smidge below them, I would say, in kind of a tier of his own. Tier 1, Urquidy, Kidd. Tier 1.5, Park. And then Tier 2, everyone else right now. That's where we're at. So when I look at this kind of situation, I just think it's two elite level drivers not willing to back off. And the thing is, I think we could be seeing much more of this throughout the campaign as things continue to get more heated between the two. And as this championship battle continues to heat and boil up more and more and more as the weeks roll on, especially we got a short track next week. We got back-to-back short tracks, actually. We got a short track as a finale. If this comes down to Belltown, between Urquidy and Kidd, oh boy, look out. That's going to be just absolutely wild. But I think this is obviously going to be the far from the last time that these two are competing in wheel-to-wheel combat. And I think that we're going to see much more beating and banking between the two. I think that this kind of situation, you saw how vintage Diego returned. He was pissed when Kid got into him. He had to go to the back, and it didn't matter because he stormed right back through the field and brought home a third place result, finished well ahead of Kid, who barely managed to crack the top 10. So it's an extremely tough situation. I'm not going to choose sides here. I'm just going to sit back, grab my popcorn like Shane Park, and kind of just let this play out. And hopefully for these guys, they can keep it clean more often than not, and we can get some great racing. But don't be surprised if they come together again at some point down the line this season, because we saw that moment really kind of set the tone for how aggressive they're going to be throughout the rest of the campaign. Anyways, we move on, and let's talk a little bit about how we were a little, I guess, confused. We didn't have an idea of who the best teams were going to be this year because of the turbo hybrid engine regulations kind of coming in for 2026. We didn't really know, okay, who's going to take this year off and say, screw this, screw the final year of these regs. We're just going to focus all our efforts into getting the turbo hybrid engines right. The answer appears to be none of the front runners. I think you can clearly see the Ronnie Woods Motorsports and Arkady Bros Racing have bought their best stuff. And I can tell you right now, I am loving every second of this. Obviously Ronnie Woods Motorsports, Arkady Bros Racing, they've won the opening 4 races of the 2025 campaign. We have gotten a fantastic scrap between Kid and Arkady thus far. I think that, we are in for a special championship battle this season between Arkady, Kid, and who knows, maybe Park could throw his name in there as well. It's going to be very interesting. And, it's just, I think that, we could see Carson Schmidt as well and Nick Arkady in a Swan Song campaign get up there too. I think we'll definitely see Ross Jackson, specifically Colin Ward. Once he starts to figure things out, I think we'll see them back in the mix. It's going to be fun watching, two of the sport's most historic, iconic organizations just kind of going back and forth throughout the season. And because they're throwing everything at it, they are all in. So final year of the current regs, they're throwing everything at it. And I think the real question is going to be when we get down towards the end of the season, when development for the turbo hybrid engines really starts to ramp up, okay, do you focus on this championship or do you put more of that energy into the new regulations? That's going to be a very interesting subject to kind of see how that plays out. But so far, these teams have brought their best and they are competing with each other every Saturday, and you just love to see it. Anyways, let's move forward to the biggest surprises and disappointments through the first quarter of the 2025 campaign. It's hard to believe we're already a quarter of the way through the season. It feels like Speed Weeks just started yesterday. That was the final week of August, and here we are closing in on the final week of September, and we're already a quarter of the way through the year. It blows my mind how quickly it's already flown by. But we've kind of seen some storylines emerge this season, and like I said, surprises and disappointments through the opening portion of the campaign. I think in terms of the surprises category, number one for me has to be Norm Lester. Man, he goes to let's start with what happened to him in silly season last year. So obviously, towards the end of last year, he gets the boot from Michael White Racing. They decline his team option and basically say, well, you're not coming back here next year. You haven't done well enough. What have you done for us lately? You've done nothing. Bye-bye. He's 37 years old, oldest driver in the sport, now a free agent, looking for a ride. Many people assumed he'd just be retiring at this point. But Lester's like, no, I want to keep racing. I want to keep competing for championships. And so he keeps searching. He keeps searching, and he finally gets a call from Taylor Motorsports to field their full-time entry for the 2025 season. And the job that the 38-year-old has done this season behind the wheel at number 77, that was okay last year, but Lester has them, in the top five. He just had him in the top five for the Stoneyard. Has had him around the top 10. Otherwise, they were around the top 10 at West Virginia as well. Like, he's within the top five in points right now. Norm Lester has done a fantastic job this season. No ifs, ands, or buts. And he is by far my biggest surprise. I think a lot of people really expected him to be 15th, 20th in points on that inaugural team, even though they are an NDRL powerhouse. This is their first full-time Cup campaign in the ASCA. But Lester has done a fantastic job. And obviously, we still have 12 races to go. 3/4 of the season still remains, so a lot can change. And, who knows? They could fall off a cliff. But so far, a second in the Ajax 200, a fourth at the Stoneyard. Got to be impressed by what Norm Lester has done this season. Another big surprise, Brian Dixon. This is a guy coming off an 18th place points finish a year ago. He's now 30 years of age. So, it seemed like he was kind of washed at this point. He hasn't really done much in, the past 3-4 years. Since he won that Ajax 200, what has Dixon done realistically? He's even failed to crack the top 10 in points, the past 2 years. Failed to crack the top 15 last year. And this is all while Cameron Atwood is going insane. Just in the garage right next to him. And even Chris Barrymore has won a race in, the past 2 years. So, and we talk about Barrymore being a disappointment. Dixon's been nowhere even close to Barrymore. This year, Dixon appears to have turned back the clock. Nothing special. Obviously, just DNF'd in the at the Stoneyard, but back-to-back top 10 finishes to open up the new year. He's currently within the top 5 in points still. I believe he's 5th in points as we speak. He's done a really solid job this season. And I don't think he's gotten enough credit for the work that he's done, really kind of getting that number 16 back on track. And, the lucky thing for him is that obviously Chris Barrymore declined his team option, because I think Dixon, they would have probably found a way to get him out had Barrymore wanted to stick around for 2026. They probably would have found a way to get Dixon out and get out of his deal that lasts through the 2026 campaign. But instead, now they kind of have to keep him because that would be way too much to try to swap out 2 different drivers at the same time. So he's kind of got a little bit of a cushion. He's gotten off to a fast start this season. So it's nice to see that number 6 car finally back up front again. And hopefully he can keep that up. The 30-year-old can keep that up throughout these next few weeks. And who knows, maybe he could be a dark horse title contender. I don't know. Crazy things have happened. Now, in terms of disappointments, I think the biggest disappointment by far this season has to be Randall Woods. Man, this is and the thing for Woods is it even Father Time that's causing this for him? I don't think it is. I honestly don't think he's quote unquote washed yet. I get he's 37 years old, but he's had 3 DNFs in the first 4 races. So it's really impossible to tell, like, has he lost pace or just is it just sheer awful luck? And I lean towards awful luck, honestly. You look at his DNFs, caught up in the big one at the Ajax 200. He still did get a top 10 in that race, mind you. So I guess that wasn't truly awful luck to DNF and still get a top 10. I mean, you'll take that. But then you look at these past couple weeks, had that unsafe release at West Virginia, got in the pit road collision with Ross Jackson. That took him out of contention. And, obviously after that, parted ways, a longtime crew chief, Steve Wallace. And that's just, I don't even think that was due to unsafe release, although Wallace was going to be suspended for that. I think that that was mainly due to just that this is a team that has not won in what, over 20 cup races by now. I think it's the official number is 23. Like, he hasn't won since the Disney Plus 200 2 years ago. So, like, they have to do something. And Woods knows his championship window is closing. And this is certainly not a good start to what could be one of his final years at the cup level. He currently sits 22nd in points last time I checked, 3 DNFs in the first 4 weeks, and just hasn't even been anywhere remotely close to the front. Doesn't even have a top 5 finish this year. So this 18 team, they need to put up or shut up at Disney. They need a win, or at least to be up there leading laps or something. They can't afford to have another mediocre race. They need a big result in a big way under the lights Saturday night. That there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And then another kind of disappointment for me has to be Carson Schmidt. We're going to talk about him in a second, as he did just get a new contract to resign with Orchidea Bros Racing, making big money now for the next 2 years actually. But this season he hasn't really done that much. I mean, he's got 2 top 10 finishes, but no laps led, no top fives, and I do kind of question whether or not Orchidea Bros Racing did make the right decision to re-sign him, because they're talking about a guy that has only 9 top 10 finishes and 36 starts. And everyone's kind of hopping on that Schmidt bandwagon because he's 22 years old. He won a cup race last year. I get it. I get it. He went on that wild run, but he still only had 5 top 10s last year. He does have 2 to start this year in 4 races, but he also has the 2 DNFs as well. It's really tough to kind of gauge, is he really ready to take that next step? I don't know. I don't know, honestly. But so far this season's been a disappointment. He's not even in the top 15 in points. He just DNF'd on the opening lap of the ARS 200. Um, really, it's hard to say if Schmidt will be able to bounce back from this. We'll see. We'll see, obviously. Disney's going to be a huge race for him. He struggled here in the past, though, so I don't know how this race is going to go, but the 12 team is going to need a big result if they want to kind of recover this season. We'll kind of leave it at that. And speaking of Schmidt's big contract extension, 2 years, $20 million to remain at Orchidea Bros Racing through the 2027 campaign. And first of all, I will say that I'm happy for Schmidt. I'm happy that he finally has stability for the first time in the past couple of years. He knows where he's going to be racing through the 2027 season. So he's got that stability. He knows he's going to be in that 12 car for the next couple years. That's huge. That's definitely huge for a young driver and kind of ensuring his confidence. Now, is he worth $10 million, though? That's the thing where I'm like, man, and I get it. Like, this is the rate that young drivers are going for. I'm sure Orchidea Bros Racing probably made the right decision to get this extension done before Brain Bennett got his, because now Bennett's going to be asking for more than $10 million a season, because he knows he can probably get that on the open market. And that's just kind of where that Bern Reddard contract extension has put these team owners. They gotta pay any driver, any driver that has potential to be elite level or has shown that they've been elite level in the past. They have to get big money, upwards of $10 million a season, because of that Renner deal and the precedent that it set. So I like that Orchidi Bros Racing re-signed him, but for $10 million a season, I don't know, man. I really don't. Like, I just talked about this. This is a guy that only has 4 top 5 finishes and 36 starts. Let's be real here. 4 top 10s, 4 top 5s, 9 top 10s, and 36 starts. And you just paid him $10 million a season. That is very iffy, man. It's very iffy. And we still don't know if Schmidt's the end of 2024 was a fluke for him. We really don't, honestly. Because he had that great run in the final quarter of the season, but where was he the first 3/4 of it? So I got a lot of questions about this deal. I question if um I just question if he's worth that money, man. But that's just kind of the driver market is so inflated right now. You have to pay average to any above average drivers, upwards of $10 million a season. That's just where we're at. So it is what it is. Overall, happy to see Schmidt back behind the wheel of that number 12 car, and we'll see if he goes on to win some more races for Key Rose Racing to keep that dynasty alive. As obviously it's going to be a big part of doing that in the next few years as Diego continues to get older and Nick obviously calls it quits after the 2025 season. So now let's move on to the first night race of the season. We're heading down to Florida, one of the best, most well-run states in the country, down to Orlando for the Disney Motor Speedway night races, aka the Exalta 100 and the Disney Plus 200. First Friday and Saturday night events of the season, first short track events of the season, and we saw the hype, the sellout crowd that this race provided last season. It was such a fun event, to cover, such a fun weekend, and I'm really excited to see that again, because I think their experiment to give Disney a night race really worked out well, because it's just such a good track, and there's always such fantastic action every time the sport comes here. So I'm really excited to see that, and really excited to see what we end up learning this season. I mean, after this weekend. So the Craftsman Series is back in action, and obviously the story of the Craftsman Series has been Tony Del II. The last time we came to Disney, he finished second. So can he top that, finish one spot better? He very well could. We never know. But Del Val obviously has to be one of the favorites. Interesting tidbit about this race. Laquan Scranton was supposed to run it, but obviously he's indefinitely suspended, so he will not be behind the wheel of the number 16. Instead, there'll be Noah Booth making his ASCA debut behind the wheel of that car. So he will be driving the 16. So there are only going to be 3 Cup drivers in this race. Doug Bowden, Braden Bennett, and Chris Barrymore, not Cameron Atwood, behind the wheel of the number 60. So I think that it's a big opportunity for someone like a Graham Darty. Again, Darty needs a win. He really does. He is so far back in the standings. He needs a win, or he needs some help from maybe Thorson and Del Val colliding. He needs something to happen to Del Val, or at least a win, at least a big result. This is going to be a critical weekend for the 98 team. They got to get something going, because what they have going right now is not going to be enough to defend their championship. Really excited to see how Gunnar Thorson does. He is one of the most exciting drivers to watch on a weekly basis. So it's going to be super fun to see him in his first short track start. He has done obviously a fantastic job these first 3 weeks. So then we kind of move on to the Cup race, and I think the Craftsman race is so unpredictable. I think you can definitely bet that Bowden and Bennett will be up there. They're obviously pretty good on short tracks. They both won at Disney before. And even Barrymore has won the Exalta 100 before. So, those 3 are going to be up there. And then, But then it's kind of wide open from there. It could be Del Valle, it could be Thorson, could be Darty, could be Romo. There's so many different options. Could be Nick Painter. He's another really good short track racer. Maybe Sean Wooden can finally figure things out. Anyone can win the Exalta 100, I think. But the Cup weekend is so much more. I think you kind of know who's going to be up there. Obviously, anytime you visit a short track, Cameron Atwood, Greg Healy. Boom. You know those two are going to be up there in some sort of capacity. They're going to make an impact in this race. I don't care how. I don't care where they start. They could both start last, and they'll probably finish 1-2 at night's end. I mean, they've won 7 out of the last 10 short track races. So you can't pick against them. They're the two favorites, odds-on favorites, and for good reason. But after that, Diego Urquidy is a multi-time winner of this race. Randall Woods, we just talked about him. Massive disappointment this season, but he's won this race twice. If he's going to bounce back, it better be here. He needs a big result. Braden Bennett has a lot of momentum from the Stone Yard last week. He needs he led 128 laps in this race last season. Big opportunity for him to kind of build on that momentum and really kind of get on a run here. If he can bring home a good result, potentially maybe even his first career win. Yeah, it's you kind of have your usual suspects. And as much as I think a guy who we need to keep a close eye on, though, is points leader Todd Cannon. Kind of just how much he struggles here, because traditionally this is his mulligan. Every year, he just doesn't have it here. So we'll see how it goes for Kidd. But as for my picks to win this week, I'm going to go with Doug Bowden for the Craftsman race. He just dominated West Virginia. I don't see why he wouldn't go back-to-back here at Disney. He's won this race multiple times, and he has really gotten a hold of that 22 this season. So I'm going to pick Bowden to win the Exalta 100. As for the Cup race, Cameron Atwood, man, he was so close last week. Oh, my God. That's such a heartbreaking way to lose in the pits like that, leading 132 laps and still taking a loss, qualifying in pole position. He's going to be pissed. And as long as his pit crew doesn't sell again, I think Atwood's due. He's due for a win. So I think he's going to get it this weekend at Disney and go back-to-back with that one. So there we go. That is a wrap for this edition of the ASCA Weekly Podcast. I'm your host, Charles Fallon. I guarantee you we're going to have a lot to talk about after the Saturday night short track race we're going to see this weekend. So certainly can't wait to discuss it all with you guys in the next episode. And yeah, we'll see you next time.